Hi guys, today we're going to talk some basics that are very important in face painting, loading your one strokes and your rainbow cakes. I'm going to show you how I load my one strokes, when I use a 1" or a 3/4, as well as some of the other things I do with my one strokes and rainbow cakes that you may or may not be doing, but I really like to do on the job. So I'm also going to go over my larger rainbow cakes and sponges and how I load my sponges with my rainbow cakes. So a couple basics, but really important. I have noticed a lot of questions lately on this, so thought that a video may be helpful. As always, let me know if you have any questions, and I hope this helps. So stay tuned and check out how I load my rainbow cakes and my one strokes. Okay, so I have a basic classic true rainbow here and a few brushes, a 1" a 3/4" brush, and a smaller 1/2" brush as well. Now this is a little dirty, so I'm going to show you guys first how I clean it. Usually on the job I'll take a wet wipe or I'll spray it and take a cloth and I'll just swipe that cloth over the cake. You might have to spray it a couple times and then swipe again in one direction, and then just fold over your paper towel or your wet wipe over and over again and just keep cleaning it up. All rainbow cakes get dirty. I don't care how great of a face painter you are, yours are going to get muddy and dirty, so it's important to clean them up. Now, with the true rainbow, I like using a 1" because it gets all of the colors. If you use a 3/4 with something like 6 colors like the rainbow, you can either put it to one side and get most of the colors or go down the middle and you're also going to pick up most of the colors. But for true rainbows, a personal preference, I like using a 1". I also like using an angled brush because you have a toe and a heel and I feel like I have more control over it. Now, one way to load this is to dip into your water. You do not want to completely saturate your brush, but get just enough on there to activate the paint and then start going back and forth with the brush. You also want to put quite a bit of pressure down, not just the very tip of the brush, but you want to push the bristles into the cake. So I need more water. So I'm just going to dip the tip of the brush back in and go right back into my cake. Now you can see it's starting to pool a little bit, but that's okay. It's going to happen. What you need to do is just keep loading the brush, going back and forth, pushing those bristles down into the cake, because what you don't want is to just load the tip of the brush. You want to get the paint worked down into the middle of the brush and up to the ferrule as best as you can. So you can see here I've got paint about halfway up on my 1" brush, and that's perfectly fine, but I want to get it loaded more than that. I want it up to the ferrule of the brush as much as I can, so I'm not going to stop here. The first time I load my 1" brush on the job, I go back into my water and back into my paint over and over again. I tend to spray my cakes a lot on the job because I get more water on them. And then this is more the pace of what I would normally do. I was going a little slow to show you guys, but usually I go pretty fast and I really work that paint into the brush. So it doesn't matter whether you want to spray your cake or whether you want to dip into the water. When it comes to best practices, a lot of people are going to tell you don't spray your rainbow cakes or your one strokes, but for me, when I'm on the job, I spray them. Okay, so I'm going to test this out. You can see I'm well loaded, but on the toe of my brush where that red is, it's a little bit dry. So I need to work more water and more paint into my bristles to get the right consistency. So I went ahead and sprayed it very liberally, and I'm going to go back in. So when I have nice shiny paint on my brush, that's when I know it's ready. That is much better. That is a well-loaded one stroke with a rainbow. Now, if you load your brush well the first time, you can keep painting with it. That's how you know if you are loading your brush well or not. You should be able to paint I would say at least 4 or 5 rainbows with one good load of the brush. So you can see, and that doesn't mean the tip might not get a little bit dry at some point, but you should be able to keep painting. If you are only getting one stroke out of a rainbow when you're loading your brush, then you need to work more paint and more water in and go back and forth and do it over and over again until you've loaded your brush better. So then after that, say I've done, one kid, I'm moving on to the next kid, I might dip right back into my water and back into the paint, or I might spray and dip back in. Now, if you overspray, you will see that it's going to start to pool in the corners. Now, if you spray and you go right in with your brush, you can prevent this kind of muddiness that's happening right now. But since I let it sit for a second, it's getting all muddy and gross. So sometimes I'll just go right in with my brush, pick up the excess water, and then wipe it right off on a towel to clean it up. If I'm on the job, that is the easiest way for me to clean something up really quickly rather than going and grabbing a wet wipe. But be careful because you can muddy up your brush really easily doing that. So now I need to clean out my brush very, very well, which I'm doing in my rinse well here. Wipe it off on a towel, and then even clean it up a little bit if you can or if you need to, depending on how muddy you get it. Okay, so this is Leanne's rainbow and a 3/4 inch brush, and I went ahead and I got my brush wet, and I am going to load this up, and I want to show you guys this one because it's a difficult split. With that yellow and blue right next to each other, it always melds into green. That's okay. Sometimes you're not going to be able to prevent this. It's still a beautiful, beautiful cake and a lovely application, and I love this. But when I'm using this on the job, it gets muddy. I think sometimes people think that especially beginners, that it has to be perfect and you're doing something wrong. You're not. There are some one strokes that don't load as well, or colors that are right next to each other that blend together and get muddy. It's fine. You can see I can still paint with this and work with it. And I can't prevent that, especially at a high volume event. If I'm being really slow and careful, I can load this so that the blue doesn't turn into green with that yellow. But usually I can't, and that's okay. So I wanted to show you guys this one because I think it's a finicky one stroke and a really, really good example of that. And I hope it eases some of your minds when you're thinking you're doing something wrong. You're not. Okay, so I said in the beginning of the video I was going to show you guys things that I do with my rainbow cakes that you may or may not be doing. One thing I do with my larger cakes is I use them as one strokes. So this blue and white, for example, I use a lot as individual colors. Maybe I want to do a blue and white flower on someone, or I want to use it for an Elsa or Frozen crown. I take my 3/4 inch brush, I dip it in some water. Definitely don't spray the entire cake when I'm just going to use a couple colors. I definitely dip, but that way all of my rainbow cakes are also multiple one strokes because you could pick up 3 different combinations of color on this one rainbow cake. So I do this a lot at events. Now, when it comes to loading your sponges, you can use all sorts of different kinds of sponges, petal sponges, half rounds. Definitely don't use the full round. If you buy those, cut those in half. Now, a great thing to do when you're beginning face painting is to spray your sponge. One, if you are overloading your sponges, this is going to give you so much control of how much water you're applying. However, I don't like doing this because I never get enough water on it. I feel like when I spray my sponge and then I go back and forth maybe 2 or 3 times before I get my sponge properly loaded with that color. Great thing to do when you're starting out because you cannot overload your sponge. And if you have a problem doing that, this will help. But you can see it's just not loaded well enough for me. So I really like and will probably never stop spraying my rainbow cakes at events. I know some face painters, this is absolutely going to drive you nuts. I'm sorry. I can't help it. This is how I load my sponges. I spray about 5 liberal sprays of water, And then you want to pull your sponge in one direction. Do not go back and forth. You want to quickly drag that sponge down the cake, soaking up all that water, and you really get it into the sponge. Now I'm going to show you how much coverage you can get out of this. With one good application, you should be able to do an entire butterfly or most of the face for a skull or a kitty cat. So you can see, I'm going to pull this all the way down my arm. I've gotten a lot of really good coverage out of loading this sponge that way. It's how I prefer to do it. Now here's a cake that I recently purchased, and when I sprayed it, you can see that two of the colors kind of shrank up. Probably a really good example why people say don't spray your rainbow cakes. It's fine, I can still use it. I don't really understand why it did that. I'd never had a cake do that to me before, but oh well. Again, even regardless that it did it, I don't care, still spraying my cakes. So I spray it, and then with my Petal Sponges and any sponge, I always make sure that the darkest color is going to be on the outside of what I want to do. And I also really load the edge of the sponge. Whether I'm using a Petal Sponge or one of my half rounds, you can see I'm really focusing on one edge to put most of the paint, because that's what I'm going to manipulate. I don't really load the entire flat side with paint. So you can kind of see that. Mainly loading the edge because that's what I'm going to lead with. And I will show you just a quick butterfly wing. And you do have to think about, you're loading this and pushing the paint inside the sponge. So when you put that sponge down on a kid's face or on your arm for practice, you have to put pressure on it. You have to almost think of it like you're now squeezing the water and the paint out of that sponge. If you barely tap, nothing's going to come out. You have to push. And you do have to reload sponges sometimes. That's okay. Just go ahead and give it a couple more sprays with water, go back in with my sponge, and go back to my arm and apply the color. I also mentioned in another video, and we'll say again too, don't think you have to get every color down at once. You want to rotate your sponges back and forth to put down the purple and then the white and yada yada. Now, another thing I do with all my rainbow cakes, I use them as smaller splits. So, for example, this butterfly, I want a dark outside. I look at this other cake and think purple, blue, perfect. So I go in with a 1/2 inch brush, pick up those two colors, go back to my butterfly wings, and I use those as the detail. Now, when I started out face painting, I had a lot of solid colors that I felt like I could not live without. Now that I've been doing this for a while, I use my rainbow cakes like this more than my solid colors. I almost never use my solid colors, which is kind of sad because at one point they were so important to me. Now that I do this kind of thing more, where I'm using those colors in my cakes to replace my solid colors, sometimes I feel like I could get rid of them altogether. So I'll also go in with my cakes and pick up things like white. I want to go in and do dots and highlights. I've got these two cakes right in front of me, a nice pure white. Go in there, and I'm going to scoop up some white on the tip of my brush because that helps get some nice, beautiful round dots. And I'm going to add some detail. So I could paint an entire design with just a couple rainbow cakes because I'm using other brushes with them. I'm using them as solid colors. I'm using them as rainbow cakes and splits in different ways. So I hope this will make you think about how you can do that, because I've found on the job when I'm busy that it doesn't really matter if I have white right in front of me, or if I have a solid turquoise, or maybe there's a color like that green in that blue cake, that permanent green would be perfect, a perfect highlight for the dragon I'm doing, then I will grab it out of the cake. And you're never going to use so much of one color that you're really going to run it down. So I encourage you to try this, especially if you're a festival face painter. It's really fun to do, and you'll look at your paint in a completely different way, and all of a sudden you're going to have 100 more colors than you realized. So another way that I'll use my rainbow cakes and split cakes is that I'll look at colors next to each other and I will load my floral brushes with them. So I've got white and turquoise here. I'm just going to run my petal brush back and forth to pick up the white and the turquoise. And I'm even going to dip the tip back in and go straight into this blue. And I'm going to load my petal brush. I also know that some face painters, this will drive absolutely nuts because they cannot stand to have their paint all muddied up. But when I'm on the job and it's high volume, everything's getting dirty, everything's a mess. I clean it all up in the end. It's so easy to clean up that this doesn't bother me at all, and it's a huge time saver. So you can see I went ahead and added some petals, went back in with my round brush, picked up more white out of my split, adding a few highlights, and there you go. I hope this video was helpful. Please let me know if you have any questions. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you in my next video.